everyone, and thank you for joining us for this event entitled Enhancing Nationally Determined Contributions, or NDC Ambition, organized by WWF Malaysia in partnership with MCCG as part of the Climate Action Forum series of events for iGEM 2020. I am Lavanya Rama Iyer, Head of Policy and Climate Change in WWF Malaysia, and I will be the moderator for today's session. WWF Malaysia would like to record our thanks to the organizers of iGEM, MGTC and CASA for providing us with this opportunity. Being the first virtual event of this scale for most of us, indeed it was a steep learning curve, and we would also like to thank all those behind the scenes who have been providing excellent technical support to make this event a reality. This event on enhancing NDC ambition has been split into three parts. We will hear policy-related views today from our excellent lineup of speakers. Tomorrow, we will explore what tomorrow's leaders need us to do today. And on Friday, we will hear the corporate perspective. Incidentally, all the sessions are scheduled to run from 4 to 6 p.m. As you all know, the Paris Agreement in 2015 introduced a new architecture to tackle the climate crisis. It introduced a mechanism whereby all countries could state their commitment in terms of climate action with the goal of cooperating and working together to keep the average global temperature rise to well under 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase even further to 1.5 degrees Celsius as demanded by science. Additionally, the agreement aims to increase the ability of countries to deal with the impacts of climate change and at making finance flows consistent with a low GHG emissions and climate resilient pathway. In this regard, the agreement encapsulates the important principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities, recognizing the different developmental status of signatory parties and therefore the different abilities to contribute to the goal, which is critical for all to achieve. Another unique feature is that the agreement obliges regular reporting and monitoring to track our collective progress and also contains a ratcheting up mechanism. Hence, countries are invited to periodically enhance their commitments and introduces a stepwise approach by all to continue to make their respective contributions more ambitious towards meeting the overarching goal of the agreement. Now, some analysis shows that under current emissions reductions commitments, we are on a trajectory of around a 3-degree global average temperature rise by the end of the century in 2100. That might seem far off, and many of us will even no longer be around, though our legacies in terms of the action we take today will certainly remain for our children to either enjoy or suffer. But more immediately, even with the current situation whereby average global temperature has risen 1 degree above pre-industrial levels, we are already facing severe impacts in various parts of the world. We witnessed devastating wildfires and flooding before the whole world plunged into the global pandemic. So in today's session, we will listen to a wide range of views on why and how enhancing our NDCs makes sense from multiple perspectives. It is also timely for Malaysia in starting our mid to long-term post-COVID-19 economic recovery pathway. Our NDCs will serve as a guiding light in this effort. So now I'm really pleased to introduce our sterling lineup of speakers today. Kicking off the session, we are very fortunate to have with us Dr. Nagulendran Kangayat Karasu, or better known as Dr. Nagu, the Deputy Secretary General of the Ministry of Environment and Water, whose ministry is in charge of climate change. Dr. Nagu has more than 20 years' experience in environmental management and has been leading negotiations on both climate and biodiversity. Next, we have the pleasure of hearing from Mr. Sean Martin, all the way from the United States. Sean is the Senior Director, Climate Change Adaptation and Resilience at WWF US, and is a seasoned trainer, on climate change resilience with a broad stakeholder grouping that not only includes WWF network staff, but also partners in government, civil society, academia, UN agencies, and multilateral banks. He will speak to us about the role of nature-based solutions in enhancing NDC ambitions. Then we have another very experienced climate proponent, Ms. Meenakshi Raman, also known as Meena Raman, is the coordinator of climate change programs at the Third World Network, or TWN, and she is also the president of Friends of the Earth Malaysia, or Sahabat Alam Malaysia. She is an expert on climate change global negotiations. She, along with her late husband, Martin Kaur, are well-known figures in the global climate negotiators circles, especially amongst the like-minded developing country grouping, of which Malaysia is a part. Meena is a lawyer, and her insightful analysis of negotiations have been widely published and can be accessed from the TWN website. Next, we are honored to induct Mr. Dio Gabinet, Regional Manager of the NDC Partnership. Dio is a climate change professional with over 10 years of experience in managing and implementing technical and research projects on sustainable urban and rural development, climate change, and disaster resilience for several organizations, including ADB, FAO, and UNDP. Thereafter, we will give the floor to Ms. Ella Wang, who is joining us from China. Ella is the head of the climate and energy practice at WWF China, and she has over 14 years experience working on sustainable development in international organizations and the business sector, mainly focusing on climate and energy issues, as well as sustainable finance across China and globally. Ella is experienced in carbon trading as well and led China's biggest forest carbon credit project development. She will unpack China's climate ambitions, especially given the recent very promising announcement by China at the UN General Assembly to become carbon neutral by 2060. And to round off the sterling panel of speakers, we are pleased to invite Mr. Dave Sivaprasad to take the floor. Dave is a managing director and partner of the Boston Consulting Group, BCG, and is currently the head of BCG Kuala Lumpur. He is a member of BCG's Global Climate Leadership team and works with public and private sector clients on climate action and energy. Dave leads the firm's climate action work in Southeast Asia. With a wide range of expertise, we will hear his views on how countries in the region and Malaysia can fuel a green recovery to drive climate action. We really have an exciting lineup of experienced speakers today who will cover a vast range of topics, which I am sure you will find to be very informative. Before starting, just a few housekeeping rules. We will be running all the presentations consecutively before having a question and answer session at the end. Please feel free to post your questions identifying the speakers they are addressed to into the chat function. We will try and respond to as many as possible during the Q&A session later. Now, without further ado, let's begin.
Good day, and thank you for joining us at this webinar. On the onset, I would like to thank Malaysia Climate Change Group for inviting me to be part of this very interesting discussion. Before I go any further, let me share my screen. Right. NDC We Want, nationally determined contributions. But before we go any further, maybe we like to see what's happening to the planet right now. I mean, as we all know, ever since Industrial Revolution and in the last decades, the Earth has been facing many challenges. Especially, we have seen many environmental issues such as unprecedented loss of biodiversity, global warming, which has brought a lot of climate issues, health and economic issues as well. The pandemic that we're going through now also has got huge ramifications, and all this is brought due to anthropogenic or human impact onto the environment and the planet. And the world has understood these problems, and we have tried to take many actions. And I won't go too back far in history. I'll just go back to the Earth Summit in 1992, Why? Because it's very important, because at the Earth Summit, world leaders adopted 3 very important global environmental treaties, and one being the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or UNFCCC, sets out how the world is going to address the global warming issue. And it has got 2 very important protocols, the Kyoto Protocol 1997 and the Paris Agreement 2015. The Kyoto Protocol sets out very clear targets in an annex called Annex 1, with countries listed in it, mostly developed countries, on how these countries are going to reduce emissions with clear targets. And it spells out actions that needed to be taken by these countries. And developing countries, based on their circumstances, were also asked to implement measures to address climate change. And that echoed very important principles that we signed into at the Earth Summit, called the Common but Differentiated Responsibilities and Respective Capabilities, the CBDRRC. This is very important because yes, we have a common problem, but we have different responsibilities. Developed countries need to take action to address climate change, for example, whereas developing countries need to have the means to implement these conventions and these treaties. And this is very important. But let's see, what does the Paris Agreement say? The Paris Agreement was adopted in 2015 at the 21st Conference of Parties held in France, hence the name Paris Agreement. It's got nearly universal signatory with 189 ratification to date. 1 country is withdrawing. The aim of the Paris Agreement is to keep global temperatures way below 2 degrees Celsius and to pursue a 1.5 degree Celsius reduction pathway. And very important feature of the Paris Agreement is the nationally determined contribution as enshrined in Article 4.2. So what is the national determined contribution? The national determined contribution in the Paris Agreement makes every country obligatory to some kind of reduction. But how is this target set for each country? It's based on the country's own determined value. That means the governments of every party to the Paris Agreement determines a target based on its national priorities, national circumstances, and capability on a target of reduction. And this is very important. This is a very important point, that it does not discriminate between developed and developing countries. All countries need to have these targets enshrined in their NDC. And to do this, parties can take emission reduction targets through mitigation actions and through adaptation plans. And for Malaysia, Malaysia has been a very active party to the UNFCCC, and we have been very active in negotiations. We also have got a very ambitious NDC. Malaysia signed the Paris Agreement in 2015, and at that time we had an intended nationally determined contribution, and upon ratification in 2016, it became our first nationally determined contribution, or first NDC for Malaysia. Malaysia's NDC is very ambitious and is very clear. Malaysia intends to reduce greenhouse gas emission intensity by 45% by 2030 relative to 2005 figures. So it's 45% by 2030 based on 2005 figures. And Malaysia's NDC has got 2 limbs to it. 35% of reduction will be done unconditionally. That means Malaysia will do it based on our own capability and capacity. But 10% of it is conditional. Conditional upon receipt of climate finance, technology transfer, capacity building from developed country parties. And this is very important. And Malaysia's NDC, you could get it from the UNFCCC webpage. And just to highlight, it's got a 10-year time frame, 2021 to 2030. It covers the energy sector, IPPU, waste, agriculture, land use change, and forestry. As I said, its base year is 2005. And the diagram here shows the document, and you can get the details of the document if you go on to the UNFCCC webpage. And this diagram illustrates the kind of reduction that Malaysia will take on board based on our NDC pledge. And it also shows the scenario if we get that additional 10% from developed countries on how much Malaysia could reduce in terms of greenhouse gas intensity. And in our NDC, we also have got information about flood risk. We address flood risk. We also cover issues of food and water security. We also cover issues of protecting our coastline. There's got information on health, and this will be ever more important given the COVID pandemic that we are all facing. In terms of NDC timeframe, this is the timeframe. We had the INDC in 2015, which later became the NDC in 2016 when we rectified. We are now busy updating the NDC in 2020. And in 2025, there'll be an assess on the progress made by parties in terms of the pledge they've put into the NDC. And in 2030, we're all supposed to come up with the second NDC depending on how we have progressed in terms of addressing climate change. So why do we need to update the NDC? I mean, we have the first NDC in 2016, so why do we need to update it? In 2020, we are required to update because many countries have got many experiences in the last 4 years in terms of enhancing our technical and policy information into the NDC. We need to have an NDC which is developed through an open, transparent and participatory approach involving all stakeholders, let it be government, NGO, industry, academia. So that's the reason why we need to do an NDC update. We need macro policies such as the 12th Malaysia Plan and the Wawasan Kemakmuran Bersama 2030 to have climate highlighted in this document so that it can nudge at a very high level policy and climate action. And having an updated NDC with greater clarity will also provide the opportunity for developed countries and partners and international organizations to look at areas they can assist Malaysia in terms of our NDC implementation. So this is very important why we need to do NDC update. In terms of institutional arrangement, we've got, of course, the National Steering Committee on Climate Change chaired by the Secretary General of the Ministry of Environment and Water, and the NSCCC met just recently in October, early October. And I thank the team for giving a brief to the NSCCC on the status update of the NDC update itself. And this whole NDC update is done through a national NDC task force chaired by me. And I'm assisted very ably by two teams, the NDC Mitigation Core Team and the the NDC Adaptation Core Team. So there's these two core teams feeding in information to this whole update exercise. And the secretariat for this whole process is the Climate Change Division at the Ministry. And the terms of reference for the NDC task force is to have a whole of government approach in updating our NDC by defining what activities, what scope to be covered, and the timelines in our work in updating the NDC. It also is a very important coordinating and technical and policy platform for getting information from various stakeholders, especially government agencies at both federal and state level. The NDC task force also has got a very important task, as I said earlier, to have an inclusive participatory approach involving various stakeholders in updating our NDC. It also provides an important platform to garner support both nationally and internationally in terms of technical cooperation with international bodies. And I'll share one example in my following slides. And also this platform prepares documents to report at higher level committees such as the National Steering Committee on Climate Change. And we will also be tabling at the Malaysia Climate Action Council, chaired by the Right Honourable Prime Minister, scheduled to meet sometime in November this year. In terms of climate action and getting international support, we are thankful to UNDP through its UNDP Climate Promise program. Malaysia has been allocated US 300,000 to assist us in our NDC update and in our NDC work. This UNDP Climate Promise for Malaysia has got three important outputs. One is to have, as I said, the whole of government and the additional stakeholder approach to update our NDC and also for the implementation of the NDC henceforth. And the second output is to have the NDC enhanced through having GHG modeling and NDC information to have a more robust NDC. The third output is developing guidelines on forest conservation certificates undertaken by my colleagues in the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, where we want to incorporate forestry as a key sector in the NDC. In terms of timeline, we had the first meeting of the task force in February, and then unfortunately COVID kicked in and we couldn't have any face-to-face meeting, but work continued online, and my colleagues have been meeting various government agencies at federal and state level to update the NDCs, and in October we'll be further continuing this discussion with various stakeholders, and I myself hope to chair the second meeting sometime this month to take update and to inform the wider stakeholder on the work that's been done. And we are hoping to have, depending on how the MCU, the COVID situation turns out, we will have a right workshop in November and advanced draft to be tabled for CASA's internal approval in early December. And we hope to get cabinet approval by December, sometime the third week. And we hope to table this and submit the NDC update to the UNFCCC Secretariat before end of December 2020. The timelines look very tight, but we hope with the help of everyone, we'll be able to update our first NDC by the end of this year. And I would like to again thank MCCG for organizing this very important discussion, because I think given the COVID pandemic, I think the whole development trajectory needs to be rethought, and all these discussions we hope will be very useful in providing input as we update our NDC, and we thank you for organizing this. I also would like to thank the team at the IGEM Secretariat for having these discussions virtually. So we are still connected, though we are having this COVID, which is limiting us from meeting physically, but I think this is as effective. Thank you so much, and hope to have a great webinar today, and terima kasih semua. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Martin. I am the acting lead for climate and energy and the vice president for ecological and social resilience at WWF in the United States. And today I'd like to talk to you about how governments can enhance their nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement through nature-based solutions. First, I'd like to start off by framing exactly what nature-based solutions are. And IUCN has a very simple definition that says that nature-based solutions are actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural and modified ecosystems that address societal challenges effectively and adaptively, simultaneously providing human well-being and biodiversity benefits. And almost every organization, including WWF, has adopted this definition. The societal challenges that nature-based solutions can address include economic and social development, food security, water security, human health, disaster risk reduction, and climate change. And today we're going to talk mostly about addressing the climate crisis using nature-based solutions. Now, the IUCN definition is very complete, but it's also very broad. And with these kinds of definitions, even though they're simple, they can be interpreted and applied in various ways by different organizations. And recognizing this, WWF has a carefully crafted definition of how we like to think about nature-based solutions for climate. It's perhaps a bit too wordy, but I think it would be easiest to understand if we broke it into its several parts. And for us, the solution is the intentional use of ecosystems and ecosystem services to deliver measurable climate change adaptation and mitigation outcomes. Those are the societal challenges that we're addressing. And they are supported by conservation actions that avoid the degradation of, protect, restore, and manage the functionality of those ecosystems in a changing climate, while delivering co-benefits to people and nature. This is very similar to the IUCN definition, even though there's some slight nuances. We like to put the emphasis on the solution as ecosystems and ecosystem services rather than the conservation actions. And the reason is that conservation actions are typically designed for biodiversity conservation benefits. And while that's certainly important, we think that we're missing some opportunities if we're not looking at ecosystems and places that might not be the best for delivering biodiversity outcomes, but they are critical for other societal benefits like climate change. So our societal challenges are measurable climate-related outcomes. And those could be things like tons of CO2 reduced, avoided, or sequestered, or the number of people with reduced vulnerability to climate hazards. These happen to be the two indicators that the Green Climate Fund uses when it finances its projects. And the solutions, again, are ecosystems that provide climate-related ecosystem services. So forests, we know, store carbon, as do the soils that we find in grasslands and other ecosystems. Mangroves can store carbon as well, but they also help protect coastlines from storm surges. And wetlands are great at floodwater retention to reduce the hazards from flooding. And then if we want to ensure that these ecosystems and services are delivered, we really need to maintain their functionality by avoiding degradation, protecting, restoring, and managing them, but critically in the context of a changing climate. What often doesn't get considered when we design nature-based solutions is that they are themselves very vulnerable to changes in climate. And if we're not managing for those changes, our ecosystems and nature-based solutions could ultimately fail. One just needs to look at the fires that are happening right now in the western part of the United States, or happened last year in Australia and the Amazon. Climate change considerations are critical if we really want to ensure the long-term viability of nature-based solutions. And finally, nature-based solutions really, at their best, also deliver non-climate benefits for people and nature, things like food security or biodiversity conservation. So then how can governments increase their climate ambition using nature-based solutions? The NDC partnership asked WWF to provide simple guidance to show how nature-based solutions can enhance NDCs as countries revise their nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement. So we looked at 151 NDC documents that were available to us, and we looked for those that actually talked about nature-based solutions and how they were using them. We gathered everything that we liked about nature-based solutions in the NDCs, and we consolidated them into 8 simple recommendations, which are available now publicly in this report. First and foremost, we advocate that countries include the use of nature for both climate change mitigation and adaptation, and to prioritize actions that provide benefits for both. So here's an example from one country that talks about protecting and restoring mangroves. And they recognize that mangroves can be effective tools in mitigation while also helping the protection of low-lying coastal areas against the impacts of storms and soil erosion. Number 2 is to set ambitious, measurable, and time-bound targets. Many of the countries that talked about nature-based solutions really didn't tell us what they would do, how much they would do, and when they would do it by. Here's one example of a country that will support projects that plant around 3 million hectares of forest by 2025, so a measurable time-bound target. And they also included the estimated amount of carbon that would sequester, 3 million tons. Number 3, we really would like to maximize the benefits for biodiversity, and to do that, we advocate that countries use natural ecosystems over modified or artificial ecosystems, and particularly include the benefits we get from protected areas. So this country talks about protecting 36 paramo areas of about 3 million hectares, and securing 2.5 million additional hectares in newly protected areas. And there are many ecosystems that can serve as nature-based solutions. And for our 4th recommendations, we ask that countries explore all ecosystems types that can provide climate benefits. Here's an example that talks about coastal protection through coral reefs, mangroves, seagrasses, and dunes. And of course, there's many other ecosystems that can provide benefits, including forests, grasslands, agricultural lands, working lands, and even urban landscapes. Number 5 is that we acknowledge and manage climate risks that threaten the long-term viability of nature-based solutions, as I was discussing earlier. And not so many countries included this in their NDCs, but here's an example of one that did. The management plans of at least 6 protected areas will include climate change and variability considerations by 2025. And they go on to say that by 2025, they will have 3 integrated basin management plans that consider climate change and variability. Number 6 is that we recognize that countries are asked to provide commitments to all kinds of conventions, and they also have their own national policies. And the really strong NDCs really talked about how they would integrate nature-based solutions across multiple conventions. This country talks about their adaptation efforts in their NDC and how those will be aligned with the commitments they're making to the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. Number 7 is really important that countries adhere to social and environmental safeguards and include community participation and consultation in the development and management of nature-based solutions. And this country, as an example, talks about increasing forest cover to 40% through local community participation. And we think it's really important that people be at the center of nature-based solutions. And finally, particularly for lesser developed countries, it's important that they talk about the technical and financial support they will need to achieve results. For example, this country talks about the financial support it will need for climate change adaptation and even specifies a specific amount of $400 million that it thinks it would need to achieve its goals. So we believe by following these 8 simple recommendations, countries can greatly enhance their contributions to the Paris Agreement and achieve benefits for biodiversity and people. You can download the full report at this URL shown here. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I wish you all the best.
Good afternoon, friends from Malaysia. On behalf of the Third World Network, I'd like to thank the organizers to give us this opportunity to talk about NDCs, or nationally determined contributions, from a fair shares perspective. So we will unpack all that as to what this actually means. The term nationally determined contributions, which is under the Paris Agreement, actually was very, very heavily contested, meaning that it was a subject of huge negotiations and intense fights, largely between developed and developing countries. In fact, Malaysia led a group of countries called the like-minded developing countries and was right in the center of this fight, actually. The main fight here was about what exactly do contributions cover. The intention of the developed countries was basically to have this as a mitigation contribution. They were not interested in adaptation, or they were not interested in the needs of developing countries in terms of the finance they needed, or the technology transfer they needed, or the capacity building that they needed. So developed countries were only interested in about emissions. So what every country was going to do in regard to emissions. So this did not go down well, and ultimately the developing countries did prevail. And so right now there is the definition in the Paris Agreement is basically for the NDC to be a full scope. Basically what this means is that it covers both a mitigation contribution as well as an adaptation contribution to reflect a country's contribution to climate change, including on reflecting the finance, the technology, and the capacity building needs. So since it's nationally determined, it's really up to the country on what it wants to reflect. But what what the developing countries prevented from happening was the fact that developed countries only wanted a mitigation component. So now developing countries can also contribute, reflect a adaptation contribution as well, and also reflect their needs. I'm sure today we will be looking at Malaysia's first NDC. Just to capture that very quickly, the duration of the NDC is from 2021 to 2030. And as we all know, its mitigation contribution target is a 45% reduction of its emissions intensity of GDP by 2030 relative to 2005, of which 35% is unconditional, while the 10% is conditional on the receipt of international finance, technology transfer, and capacity building. So it's good that Malaysia in the first NDC has indicated its financial needs in relation to the 10% of the conditional finance for the target. In relation to adaptation, the NDC also conveyed some information on adaptation, signaling the desire to also reflect an adaptation component, but this is not so well elaborated, and perhaps this is something that Malaysia is currently reviewing, I think. And why including an adaptation contribution is beneficial? I mean, we're talking about fair shares, but before I get into that concept itself, it's just to show that it's quite fair for a developing country to reflect the reality of its circumstances. So if a country is only reflecting its mitigation contribution, then the whole world assumes that that is the only climate effort it's doing. That's why for developing countries, it's important to reflect the whole scale of the challenge and to reflect adaptation as well. So that the world, this includes the parties to the Paris Agreement as well as the general public, to appreciate the country has to actually prioritize climate actions, and that this also includes mitigation and adaptation, and also signals the financial, technical, and the human resources that it's needed. So actually it's a mixture of a combination of types of actions and contributions, including whether a country wants to reflect loss and damage in the future or other sustainable development aspects. So it really is an issue which is nationally determined. And this is also important to reflect the level of resources that is needed for a country. Adaptation and loss and damage will become, adaptation is already important, loss and damage is also important, but what we have recognized is that as the climate-related risks are expected to grow, the need for adaptation measures will increase, including in dealing with loss and damage. So this is a very important component, and we will be spending a lot of money in relation, our own national resources to come back, to cope with this. So it's very important that this also be reflected in the NDC. Now, in Poland, there were negotiations about the communication of an NDC, what kind of information should be communicated. And one of the aspects there is that how is an NDC of a country fair and ambitious? Now, there is nothing here in the rules of the Poland Paris Agreement implementation to actually signal how you define what's ambitious. A party can just say, we believe that this is fair and ambitious. There is no criteria that is set out as to how its contribution is fair. And developed countries in particular can be expected to claim that what they are contributing in terms of emissions reduction is fair and ambitious. And this is highly problematic, and I'll explain why. The nationally determined contributions is what's called a bottom-up approach. That means every country pledges what it wants to do from a bottom-up process. It's not a top-down allocation of the carbon budget. What that means is that now, in the run-up to the Paris Agreement, there were proposals from some developing countries to actually adopt what's called an equitable access to atmospheric space concept. This was particularly advanced by countries that included India and China. And this approach advanced a top-down approach in distributing the remaining carbon space under a 2-degree climate limit, centigrade limit, taking into account an equitable approach. And this was viewed as a fair approach. Now, we will see in a little while how why developed countries were really opposed to this. But what's important here is that the Kyoto, in the Kyoto discussions for the second commitment period, there was actually a top-down approach that was being advanced in the sense of what developed countries must do and what they should be contributing with a particular target. And that time, the IPCC reference was 25 to 40% emission reductions for developed countries. And so there was a benchmark against which the contributions of countries were supposed to be measured. But this was not extracted in the Paris Agreement process, primarily because the US resisted it. So in an unfair world, this is what the dinner table looks like, yeah? You have the rich world, and this is the developed world, and then you have the poor person coming from on the right. And you say here, the cartoon basically says, it's a bit pricey, this place. Tell you what, let's not argue over the bill. When it arrives, we just split it 50-50. Now, what you basically see here is that the remaining carbon space, and you see on that plate a huge carbon CO2 footprint, which is already there on that on the plate of the rich world, and you have the poor world with very little left, and the payment is supposed to be shared. Now, this is where it's really unfair and unjust, and I think this really illustrates the equity principle, or here, the lack of equity. So the equitable access to the atmospheric space is really about a fair shares approach. And so basically, calculations have shown that between 1850 to 2009, 1,280 gigatons of CO2 were already emitted, adding to the stock of CO2 in the atmosphere. Of this, 650 gigatons was emitted from 1850 to 1990, while the remaining 630 gigatons was emitted in just 20 years, from 1990 to 2010. So to achieve a 67% probability, now this is a dangerous probability, a 67% probability of limiting temperature rise within a 2 degrees C scenario, CO2 emissions in 2010 to 2050 must be kept around 750 gigatons. So it means that there has to be a dramatic reduction. So if the temperature rise is limited to below 1.5 degrees C, that's what many countries are calling, then the carbon budget has to be significantly less than the 750 gigatons. So it could be around 400 to 450 gigatons. And some estimates actually suggest that this will be exhausted within 10 years with the current emission trends. So what this basically shows is that there's very little space left in terms of limiting temperature rise with the carbon budget. So with a shrinking carbon budget, the right approach ought to be one where the rich developed world takes the lead with much deeper cuts in the emissions than is currently in their NDCs, and to provide the finance and technology needed for developing countries to go the low carbon pathway with greater speed. So several developing countries have recognized that what's important here is historical responsibility. The emissions of developed countries must take into account their cumulative emissions. And of the cumulative global emissions, developed countries accounted for 72% of the total compared to their share of the population. So a very small population of 25% is contributing to 72% of the total emissions. So developing countries accounted for 28% of the total cumulative emissions with 75% share of their population. So if a fair share is defined as a share of emissions corresponding to the share of population, then it is possible to measure the extent of overuse or underuse of a country's share of resources, in this case, the atmospheric space. So some countries will have a carbon debt, other countries will have a carbon surplus. And another way to look at this is a recent analysis by Dr. Jason Hickel, which came out in the Lancet, and very specifically, this was what he said: national fair shares of a safe global carbon budget consistent with a planetary boundary of 350 ppm would derive. Now, this is for a 1.5 degree limit temperature rise. These fair shares were then subtracted from the country's actual historical emissions and their consumption emissions from 1970 to 2015, and to determine the extent to which each country has overshot or undershot its fair share. So through this approach, each country's share of responsibility for global emissions in excess of the planetary boundary was calculated. So this was a recent one, and what I shared with you earlier was an analysis by the South Center. So basically, as of 2015, the USA was responsible for 40% of excess global CO2 emissions. The EU was responsible for 29%. And the global north was responsible for 92%. By contrast, most countries in the global south were within their boundary of fair shares, including India and China, although China will overshoot soon. So this is what a fair shares approach talks about. And it shows you the dimension of equity within the notion of a carbon budget. So this particular diagram explains this very simply. Instead of what the developed countries are trying to push is countering the common but differentiated responsibility. And instead, what they want to do now is to wipe out historical responsibility, and they want to advance an approach of common and shared responsibilities. So that means developed and developing countries will have to be on the same starting point. If you look at the picture on the side of this slide, you will basically see that everybody is on the same platform, and so you're treated with the same starting point, and you will see that the developing countries signified by the person in the dark skin basically is not equal, it's unequal. So this is you might be equal if you take that equality from the same starting perspective, the outcome is actually inequitable. Whereas equity will actually mean that those who require the carbon space will have to be the ones who were given more carbon space, and those who have taken so much of the space would actually have to have it reduced. So this is what a fair shares approach is. And the whole notion of common and shared approach is actually violating the equity principle of the Paris Agreement. So finally, what we need to basically understand is that we need to defend the equity principle in the Paris Agreement in the implementation process. There is a global stake process which will take place in 2023. So the developing countries are able to ensure that in the assessment of the collective progress in meeting the Paris goals, we are not unfairly blamed for not being ambitious enough. So Malaysia must, of course, do its fair share in terms of its emissions reductions, while demanding that the fair share of international resources for implementing both ambitious mitigation and adaptation is also coming forward. Now, we did not do an assessment of Malaysia's NDC, but that's for another day. But basically, this is what a fair shares approach means, and in an international context is absolutely vital. So for further information, we would like you to refer to our website, and also you can look at a new book that has just come out. It's called The Clash of Paradigms, and it's a paper by a book by me and my late husband, which will be very useful for those of you to understand this North-South fight, which has happened over the years and which is now captured in this book, and which shows you the long-drawn negotiations which ended up with the Paris Agreement. I hope that this presentation has been useful and helpful. So look forward to any questions you may have through the contact, and hope that you will buy this book and read it. So thank you very much to the organizers.
Good afternoon. Selamat petang. My name is Derek Gubanete, and in behalf of the NDC Partnership Support Unit, I'd like to thank the organizers, WWF Malaysia, and the Malaysian Climate Change Working Group for allowing us to share our insights on the global pandemic and how countries are forced to rethink their national economic growth strategies, and how the partnership is trying to help ministries of finance and planning around the world to integrate climate actions in their recovery planning. In this presentation, I'll give a quick customary overview about the NDC partnership. Then I'll share some insights that we have about the pandemic and its possible impacts to climate goals, and some ways forward in terms of how countries are aiming to pursue green recovery and how the partnership can support that. The NDC partnership is, as our name implies, is a global coalition of 112 countries and 71 institutions collaborating to drive transformational climate action while enhancing sustainable development. The partnership is actively engaged in 72 countries, 5 of which are from the ASEAN. Our members work directly with national governments, international institutions, civil society, researchers, and the private sector to support our developing member countries in enhancing ambitions and in accelerating the implementation of their adaptation and mitigation commitments as they are enshrined in the nationally determined contributions. We support countries to plan and mobilize much needed resources to implement their NDCs by leveraging resources from different development partners and developed country members and increasing the visibility and access to and responsiveness of their NDC support programs. Our longer-term vision is to create coherence and alignment between climate and development agenda, which allows for stronger political buy-in and momentum that would foster what we all aspire for, which is transformational change. And nowhere in time is that vision open to both risks and opportunities than now, when countries around the world are mobilizing to jumpstart their economies from COVID-19. As you may already know, economies around the world are projected to contract this year and even maybe next year. And ASEAN member states are not an exception. UNESCO warned in July this year that the economic impact of COVID-19 could force tens of millions of people into extreme poverty in the region due to dismal demand in production and tourism, both of which are negatively affecting the labor market. Decreased production and overall economic activity have expectedly led also to declines in emission, but not enough to dent the atmospheric CO2 concentrations. History shows us that past declines in emission caused by economic crisis have been all but temporary. Emissions usually bounce back the next year and soon surpass the previous levels. This was the case after the Great Depression, World War II, the 1980 oil crisis, and the 2008 financial crisis. Indeed, this offers a rare and very limited window of opportunity to correct how we approach similar economic challenges in the past. Last May, we reached out to 65 member countries to conduct surveys and key informant interviews to understand the main challenges faced by countries and identify ways the partnership can provide near-term support to COVID-19 economic recovery while maintaining political momentum in climate action and NDC enhancement. This exercise yielded us inputs from representatives of 48 ministries of environment or climate change and 32 ministries of finance or planning or economy from 54 countries. While we cannot predict the full long-term impacts of the pandemic, the survey revealed 3 near-term consequences that we must start taking measures to counteract. First, political attention will most likely be diverted away from climate to focus more on recovery and rehabilitation as well as public health. Second, the allocation of public financial resources will be geared more towards COVID-19 response and economic stimulus. Third, countries and development organizations alike will have reduced capacities to support much needed NDC implementation. And rightly so. But these also provide a unique opportunity to design and enact comprehensive measures to mainstream and accelerate climate action. It is, for the first time since the adoption of the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals, that socioeconomic and development needs have so profoundly and naturally aligned with urgent climate needs. The study also revealed 5 key messages. Most countries expect national climate budget cuts of around 15 to 35%, and this could even reach 50% if COVID-19 restrictions are prolonged. Respondents from environment or climate change ministries indicated that they expect the quality or ambition of their revised NDCs to be affected by the fiscal and human resource pressure caused by pandemic response. Member countries and development partners also reported challenges on data collection and validation, stakeholder communications, and decision-making processes, which they attributed to limited internet connectivity and limitations from working remotely. They also indicated an interest in learning from other countries on how to deploy stimulus support, especially from countries within the region or with similar economic characteristics and facing similar level of challenges brought about by the pandemic. Countries also identified several possible technical assistance that development partners can help them with, such as the need to support to conduct macro impact assessments of COVID-19 on national climate ambition, adjusting costing of revised NDCs, among others. The NDC Partnership Economic Advisory Support Initiative in general aims to align countries' recovery efforts with climate action. The support was tailored, responding to country-specific requests, and was deployed immediately to enable action over the next 12 months. So far, this new service offering from the partnership will support 30 countries to assess the effects of COVID in their NDCs, develop low-carbon and climate-resilient projects in line with their recovery plans, and to mobilize national and international resources to support these projects. Partners such as ADB, GGI, UNESCO, World Bank, WRI, the governments of Belgium, United Kingdom, Germany, all have stepped up to support these countries in pursuing their green recovery efforts. As of 2 weeks ago, our partners have mobilized approximately $4.5 million already, and this is $1.6 million more than what the countries originally requested. The partnership will be supporting countries like Armenia, Uganda, Grenada, and Ethiopia to jumpstart their economies by looking into innovative fiscal instruments, investments, and green jobs creation. Indonesia, for example, is gearing up to build back better with the help of several NDC partnership members such as WRI, UNESCO, World Bank, and the governments of Germany and UK. They will support the Indonesian government to assess and elaborate options on how COVID-19 stimulus packages can trigger the green economy and to best provide co-benefits of green investment that deliver improved economic, social, and environmental benefits. The initiative also offers opportunities for country members at no cost to strengthen their COVID-19 responses with on-demand technical advice, research, and guidance. NDC partnership members will provide technical backstopping on specific sectors or themes to climate adaptation and mitigation are issues incorporated in their country's green recovery responses. The partnership will also provide a platform to encourage country-to-country learning aimed at enhancing the knowledge and effectiveness of the advisors by giving them the opportunity to share lessons learned and good practices. To effectively respond to the identified needs and priorities presented earlier, we must all work together. Based on our assessment of our member countries and also echoing those what some of our members prefers, we propose the following ways forward to confront the challenges of COVID-19. On the practical side, we see great opportunities in enhancing both welfare and impact goals in our recovery measures. UNDP, for instance, proposed investing on clean physical infrastructure, retrofits that enhance efficiency, resilience, and regeneration, research and development, and educations and trainings focusing on clean and low-carbon industries. As presented earlier, the pandemic offers a rare and very limited window of opportunity to accelerate transition to sustainable energy solutions worldwide as demand for energy bounces back. This also presents opportunities for job creation and innovation. We must keep the political focus on climate. We must ensure that even in this moment of crisis, we are delivering strong international leadership. There needs to be consistent, coherent, high-level messaging. Responses and events such as this needs to be publicized and aimed at keeping political attention on climate action. We must recognize evolving needs of countries and support the alignment of climate and COVID response measures when possible. This requires continuous engagement with countries to understand existing needs and deploy adequate support in these very complicated times. We need to continue supporting countries in implementing and enhancing their NDCs during COVID-19 response. In fact, we even have to step up support in providing technical assistance for NDC implementation and updating. This could help ensure that any programming of resources in response to COVID-19 will not affect available NDC support. We have to fast-track assistance for the development and implementation of projects that have high climate and development co-benefits. And for that, we need to be flexible and be always on the lookout on how to best respond to countries' ever-changing needs and timelines. And last but not least, one of the lessons evolving from this is that it revealed the possibility of having a concerted effort in terms of scale and expediency in tackling a global threat such as COVID-19. This pandemic is unparalleled in terms of its sudden and far-reaching impacts to our society and economy, but so does climate change, and hopefully we can apply this approach too in curbing global emissions and helping countries increase their climate resilience. And that's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions or are interested about the work of the NDC Partnership, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We're very social. You can find us easily through the links on your screen. Thank you very much. Stay safe and have a great week ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ella Wang from WF China. Thanks to the event organizer to invite me to the meeting so I can share China's climate target, the current progress, and some potential actions. I think most of you have already heard in the 75 UN General Assembly, Chinese President Mr. Xi Jinping announced that China aims to have CO2 emission peak before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. The carbon emission peaking before 2030 actually reflects an improvement from the around 2030 in China's current NDC. Meanwhile, being carbon neutrality before 2060 is a new and bold target. This is not coming from nowhere. Basically, we can see there's a lot mutual exchange between China and EU in the past few months. For example, back to June this year, there was a EU-China summit. And also in September, there were the leaders meeting held between China and the European Union. Therefore, we can see both sides actually support a multilateral approach in addressing climate change and to enhance the ambition of their climate targets. So after China announced the new targets, we can see in early this month, the European Parliament actually endorsed an enhanced 2030 climate target of 60% greenhouse gas emissions reduction by 2030, compared to 1990 level. But previously, the target is 40% reduction. I think both China and EU's new targets are probably game-changing to boost the global efforts to address climate change. So let's go back and see what are China's current NDCs. According to the submission in June 2015 to UNFCCC, China's existing NDCs include 4 aspects. One is to achieve the peaking of emission around 2030 and making best effort to peak early. Second is the lower carbon dioxide emissions per unit of GDP by 60% to 65% from 2005 level. Third one is increase the share of non-fossil fuel in primary energy consumption to around 20%. And the last one, increase the forest stock volume by around 4.5 billion cubic meters on 2005 level. In addition to the NDCs, I actually would like to highlight that China also established a comprehensive package of national targets for energy and electric power sector. These are actually included in China's national planning system, namely the 5-year plans or the mid and long-term plans. Most of these targets are legally binding, which means that relevant administrative authorities will strive to achieve those targets, and they are also held accountable for the target. A few of them are aspirational, with the purpose of giving directions. Among others, WWF China further summarize the most important targets and their progress. First one is the total coal consumption. There's a total coal consumption by 2020 below 4.5 billion tons. Second one is the share of coal in primary energy consumption to around 58% by 2020. And third one is to increase non-fossil fuel shares in primary energy consumption to over 50% by 2050. Fourth one is to control the total energy consumption. And the last one is the energy intensity reduction. So basically, there's a series of targets setting by 2010 and 2015 and also 2019. I won't name the specific numbers, but let's do a stock take of implementation. According to China Ministry of Ecology and Environment, MEE, progress of NDC targets is well achieved, basically. We have made a calculation and summarization here on carbon intensity reduction, which means the carbon emission per unit of GDP output. It's already 58% of reduction by 2019. Energy transition area, the non-fossil fuel, namely renewables, hydro, and nuclear share in the total primary energy consumption is already 15% by 2019. And the peaking carbon emission, there's no official data provided for this year, for 2019. While emissions bounced back after a short period of stabilize, with the growth rate estimated in the range of 2.3% to 3% in 2018. And the forest stock volume, it's already 17.5 billion cubic meters by 2018, according to the latest 9th National Forest Survey. So in a nutshell, basically, China has already achieved all of its pre-2020 pledge, which makes China's current 2030 NDC target solid, on track to deliver, and even overachieve with strong evidence. Besides, China's current NDC target on increasing forest stock has already been achieved. It is 12 years ahead of originally planned timeline at 2030. So what are the potentials of ambition enhancement for China? President Xi Jinping's announcement of China's new target is actually of great political significance to anchor any possible enhanced ambition in China's follow-up release of concrete targets numbers. Raising ambition, WWF China have reviewed a few major research done by Chinese key advisory bodies and have analyzed about 4 pillars of China's NDC's package. Number 1 is the carbon emission peaking. It's for sure that China will, as has been piloted and demonstrated even during the 13th five-year plan between 2016 to 2020, actively encourage and support subnational governments to peak carbon emissions earlier, as well as to peak in several industrial sectors. In the next 5 years, in any case, China is on track to peak national carbon emissions by 2030, and WWF believes that China should strive to peak as early as 2025, with ambitiously established total emission budget. China has more advanced subnational jurisdictions shall pioneer emission peaking and set convincing cases. And second pillar is carbon intensity reduction. It's highly likely that China will continue to adopt intensity reduction approach for the upcoming 14th five-year plan between 2021 to 2025, and will adopt a more stringent double control approach for carbon emissions control due to the new mandate of emission peak. China's total energy consumption control experience will be highly referred to in designing the new double control mechanism on carbon. China could also further intensify its existing double control approach on energy consumption to achieve the benefits of carbon emission control, particularly total control of coal consumption. There was a scenario analysis by the leading advisory institute indicating that a 71% carbon intensity reduction can be achieved by 2030 and 92% reduction by 2050. There's also an assessed reduction rate, which indicates that 68% by 2030. WWF believe that actually 70 to 75% carbon intensity reduction can be achieved by 2030. The third pillar is the non-fossil fuel share. With low emissions energy sources growing, take more significant role to power China's social and economic development. Energy restructuring plays an increasingly crucial role to control China's emission growth, to peak national carbon emissions, and ultimately to achieve carbon neutrality. It's possible to enhance the non-fossil fuel share target to 25% by 2030, meanwhile reducing coal's share to 45%. A revolutionary structural change needs to happen in China's energy system to make robust emission peaking and reduction possible. WWF China highly encourages China's energy sector to upgrade its mid and long-term strategy to be in line with China's new political announcement. In the coming 14th five-year plan period, power generation capacities from all renewable energy shall exceed coal power capacities for a large margin. And the third pillar is the forest stock. The forest-related NDC target that China delivered 12 years ahead of 2030, it's very likely that China could highlight its efforts on advancing nature-based solutions and enhance its ambition on forestry climate actions. Chinese President Xi Jinping also got personally engaged to promote it as a good story. According to a top research, the current NDC target of 4.5 billion cubic meter increase in forest stock volume can be enhanced to 5.5 to around 6 billion cubic meter by 2030. WF as a leading nature conservation organization would actually encourage China to further elevate the target to maybe 7 to 7.5 billion cubic meters to have its maximized benefits for human, nature, and climate. In addition to the 4 pillars, we would also like to highlight that in China's existing NDC submission, there are a few qualitative narratives and quantitative targets on other non-CO2 emissions. For example, HCFC 22, HFC 23, and methane control, but not really highlighted as NDC targets. Given that China plans to advance actions to controlling non-CO2 greenhouse gas emissions during the 14th five-year plan, there's a potential to intensify non-CO2 emissions control into its package of NDC commitment. Considering of the time limit, I think I will stop here, and I would also welcome more questions in the following sessions that we can discuss about China's NDC and also maybe some of the impact or any helpful indicators to other countries. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much to WWF and Lavanya and team for this invitation to present our perspectives on green recovery and increasing the ambition on climate action. In the discussion today, I will share some global perspectives, share a perspective for Southeast Asia, and some priorities that could be considered for Malaysia looking ahead. So first off, to begin, to contextualize this in the context of the current pandemic and the COVID crisis and economic crisis that we face today, what we've observed is a significant drop in emissions globally, as you all know, that has been very dramatic and been driven by both demand and supply drops in the economy. Now, what you notice is that a lot of this has been centered around transport and industry, which have suffered with border closures, limits of movement, and so on. But what has not happened is structural changes in the other sectors, right? So this is a major drop, not for the good reasons that we would want, but it is also one that is in the temporary areas that have been affected. Now, in this context, this climate action is still a major risk that we'll need to manage, right? As you all know as well, that is a significant impact for us in the long term. Governments are starting to recognize this, and in the context of stimulus packages to restart the economies, we're seeing some level of green stimulus that's been part of these efforts. Now, if you unpack that and look at where these green stimulus measures have gone, they've primarily gone into renewable energy and electrification of the economies and the transport system in particular. But where they've not gone so much is in environmental protection and industrial efficiencies and buildings. So some good moves on green stimulus to address the climate challenge, but still more opportunities to take forward. Now, in the context of a green recovery, what's really important is where does it restart the economies? Where do you get job creation potential coming out of this? And you see that there are many potential areas where a green stimulus could drive job creation. Some of it temporary, and some of it more in long-term structural changes. So structural changes in investments in electrification of transport, in new technologies such as hydrogen and carbon capture and storage. It could have long-term job benefits. Some of them are more transient, where it's more infrastructure build out, such as charging infrastructure, retrofitting of buildings, and energy efficiency investments that may happen. So very important context in setting up a more ambitious pathway for emission reduction is how do you drive economic activity and job creation while doing that, right? In the context of the crisis that we face today. Now that said, there is a lot of support globally that's growing on taking climate action. And what's interesting is when you look at this data, which is a survey that was done pre-pandemic, but similar surveys that have been done post-pandemic have shown similar sentiment and patterns, and in some cases also increase the support for green stimulus and climate action, is increasing support across constituents and civil society. And you see Southeast Asia countries are represented inside here in this data as well, right? Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Philippines. Now we've done a analysis of what does it take for Southeast Asia to pursue a more ambitious climate path, and one which creates competitive advantage for the region and economic activity for the people. And what our analysis has shown is that there's significant potential to achieve a 60 to 70% net zero path in a 2-degree pathway, with a positive economic impact to the region, right? Now, significant investment will be needed over a 30-year period to achieve this, but there's net economic benefit here with existing technologies. Now, where does these opportunities lie for Southeast Asia? Given we're in a region with huge forest cover, peatland, agriculture, and so on, huge opportunities with nature-based solutions. Southeast Asia is one of the most promising regions for nature-based solutions today. Now, part of that is the potential to create an ecosystem for sustainable financing around offsets and carbon credits that also creates economic activity for the region. So these two are closely interrelated. And across the broader economy, renewables, energy efficiency, electric vehicles, and greater share of public transport all have positive benefits, both for the climate, but also to generate economic activity and competitive advantage for the region. Now that's Southeast Asia as a whole. Now, if we were to look a bit deeper into Malaysia, there's huge opportunities for energy and renewables, in transport, driving greater energy efficiency in industry, increasing the efficiency of our building stock, and also forestry and agriculture, which is a big competitive advantage for Malaysia as well. Now, one of the benefits of pursuing these opportunities is the job creation potential, right? So in energy, for example, if there's greater penetration of renewables, it supports the local renewable cluster. It could, in the long term, support additional technology evolution and economic activity in storage, and this creates jobs and helps growth in the economy. Similarly, for transport, building a cluster around electric vehicles in the country builds on existing strengths with an existing auto cluster, and again contributes to jobs and economic activity. So many of these have multiple benefits, right? They're benefits of mitigation, and they're benefits of contribution to the economy. Now, just to go a bit deeper on land use and forestry, this is a illustration of the greenhouse gas footprint for Malaysia, and you see that forestry and land use is a huge carbon sink for the country, right? So this is a fantastic asset, and one that can be built on to create competitive advantage for Malaysia to advance its climate agenda. And what's interesting here, and we've done some recent analysis on this, is that globally, when you look at nature-based solutions, there is significant potential for this to also create jobs. So what you see on the left-hand side is for every $1 million of investment, how much jobs does it create? And you see that globally, afforestation, coastal management are some examples where you have significantly more job creation than some of the other alternatives. So a fantastic asset for the country, one that can be built on and build and generate jobs, economic activity, competitive advantage for the long term. Now, just in closing, we'd like to say that it is a unique opportunity. It is a unprecedented crisis that we face, and all constituents in society need to act. Governments, investors, corporations, civil society all need to act to push a greater climate agenda and also drive a recovery of the economy coming out of this crisis. But the opportunity is unique. And in a unique opportunity like this, there's a potential for a build back better for Malaysia in the long term, where the country has driven an ambitious sustainability agenda, created new jobs, built resilience for the economy in the long term, and built new sources of competitive advantage. So with that, let me close and thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Allow me to quickly sum up before we move on to the question and answer segment. We heard from Dr. Nagu about Malaysia's NDC and the process being undertaken presently to enhance it. And we also heard from Sean Martin on how nature-based solutions could be used to enhance NDCs and serve both mitigation and adaptation objectives. And related to this, we heard from Dave Shivaprasad about how nature and biodiversity provide a competitive edge for Malaysia in designing our post-COVID recovery, apart from the opportunities available to reduce energy emissions through investing in structural changes now. Dio told us about how the NDC partnership is supporting climate action in economic recovery efforts. And we also heard about the importance of equity in determining fair shares of NDCs based on access to the atmospheric space resource from MENA. And finally, a very helpful analysis by Ella of how China is faring in its emissions reductions trajectory and the implications of their strong announcement to become carbon neutral by 2060. Now, over to the Q&A. I'm pleased to let you know that we have all the panelists with us today, except for, unfortunately, Dr. Nagu, who has been taken away on work, and Sean Martin, who is based in the US and unable to join us due to the time difference. However, if you have questions for them, we will revert via email after communicating with them. Thanks to the virtual format of this forum, we have our panelists now joining us from China, Singapore, Bangkok, and Penang today. So without further ado, let me just pose a general question. What would be, to Meena and Dave, maybe Meena, you can take it first. What are your suggestions for Malaysia to enhance our NDCs? Meena?
Thank you, Lavanya. Not an easy question. I think fundamentally, we can do a lot more on adaptation, actually. I think what I signaled in my presentation was that there isn't enough focus. There was some signaling of ideas, and I think the ministry is has convened a task force to look at this. So I think a lot more on that side that can be done. I certainly think that we can do more on the forest side because those of us who we've been talking about nature-based solutions, as you all have been stressing, but I think one of our major concerns is that while the federal ministry is has made a commitment about ensuring that Malaysia's 50% target, internationally, that 50% of our forests will be maintained, many of us working on the ground are very concerned by what we see at the national level, at the ground level, how states are not going in line with that. So I do think that we have a mismatch in terms of what the federal desires and what the states are doing. So this is one area in terms of forests and biodiversity. For us, I think that is absolutely critical in terms of enhancing our ambition to ensure that I agree with some of the speakers that we can do much more on that side of things. And of course, given the fact that we are relying on, many of us have also been quite critical about coal and the use of coal in the fuel mix and upscaling renewables, of course. But while we are also critical, we are also aware of the challenges in terms of the financing and so on. So we think that actually there is a lot more opportunity to enhance, and we can do it. The issue really is one of coherence and coordination of a much higher level, including from the Prime Minister's office as well.
Thank you, Meena. Dave, would you have anything to suggest?
Thank you, Lavanya, and I think Meena touched all the key points on that one. So I would say that in the long term, as we come out of this pandemic crisis, to enhance NDCs would be, you get the most progress when you combine it with economic growth and job creation, right? So when we can do the two together, that's when we get the most traction. And there are opportunities, right? As Meena, you mentioned as well, changing the energy system, driving more efficiency in industry, shifting how transport options are scaled in the country, whether that's more energy efficient transport, electric vehicles, or more public transport infrastructure. They all play a part, and they all have the potential to generate economic activity and jobs. And I think those are the ones that have the most potential in the immediate term. And 50% forest cover for the country is a huge competitive advantage, right? And I think that's one that the country can take advantage of, and especially as carbon gets increasingly priced. And I think some of our other panelist colleagues have much more experience in this and can speak to that in depth. But as this gets more priced, the ability for a country like Malaysia to generate credits through its forest cover and nature-based solutions is another source of economic growth for the country, right, in the long term. So I think these are all opportunities which add to the economy and can contribute to greater ambition on the NDCs.
Thank you very much, Dave. And I think it's quite encouraging. I think recently we heard from the minister, KETSA minister, that we have launched the RED Plus finance frame. So hopefully this will enhance our abilities to, reap the benefits of being this forest-rich, biodiverse-rich nation that both of you touched on. Now, if I may, to Dio and Ella, can I ask, we've talked about adaptation. So how strongly should adaptation be featured in NDCs from countries like Malaysia? We are a developing country. So what would you say? Maybe Dio first, please.
Right. Thanks for the question, Lakshmi. So as everyone knows, of course, everyone is, especially here in Southeast Asia, we are already experiencing the impacts of climate change. It's no longer something that we read about in journal articles or report publications coming out of IPCC. It's something that's very real to many of the communities in Southeast Asia, especially those that are living in coastal areas who are already experiencing extreme weather events, be it in increased intensities of typhoons, monsoon periods. Of course, a number of communities, farming communities in lower Mekong region are also experiencing saline intrusion and severe droughts in the past few years, as well as, of course, the thing that we're all trying to really prepare for, which is sea level rise. Some estimates, especially from I think the one coming from Asian Development Bank, puts it at around 11 to 10 or 11% of countries' GDP by 2020, by the end of the century, it's 2100. And it would have severe impacts on sectors such as agriculture, tourism, fisheries, along, of course, with human labor and productivity, which are in many countries in Southeast Asia are heavily reliant on this sectors. So this clearly shows that having a robust adaptation plan is imperative for many countries, all countries, I would say, if we are to create coherence, among SDGs, NDCs, NABs, and any country's socioeconomic development plan. Adaptation measures are crucial to ensure that mitigation targets are met, and and that we could actually safeguard any climate investments for that matter. And countries understand this very well. And based on this a survey that was made around March, this March, around 77% of the NDCs that have been submitted so far have elements of adaptation in it. And based on the support, the countries that we're supporting right now in terms of NDC revision or updating, and also discussions that we're having with countries in the region and across the world, it's apparent that countries are aiming to provide more prominence to and more quantified measures to adaptation. So that's something that we are expecting to happen once we see more submissions in the coming months.
Thank you, Dio. Before I pass on to Ella, I just wanted to follow up on that. Do you also see loss and damage being featured in NDCs now?
Yes, more prominently from Pacific Island countries and another small island developing states. So this is something that they are looking at. And I think if you look at the recent submission from Vietnam, they have also included loss and damage in their NDCs.
Thank you. So Ella, what do you think about adaptation and possibly also touching on loss and damage in NDCs?
Yeah, thanks. I think generally there is not sufficient emphasis on adaptation and also include adaptation in the NDCs. I've just heard from Dio that there's a percentage of countries have submitted NDC includes adaptation measures. However, I think there's not sufficient emphasis, particularly in terms of implementation and also in the general awareness building and in the industrial climate actions, there's not sufficient emphasis on adaptation. For example, in China, when we talk about mitigation, there's clear, for example, carbon market and also on regional work, on subnational regional work on cities, there are clear targets and also the approach setting down for those subnational actors to behave in line with the Paris Agreement, or at least to do a clear target setting and also give approach to achieve that. However, when we talk about adaptation, if you talk to a mayor or like a provincial head, there's not sufficient understanding, for example, on what is adaptation and what it means to cities and to provinces in terms of implementation in different industries, for example, in transportation, in energy, what it means to us. So this is something urgently need to be enhanced. And also when we set up specific targets, when we break down the NDCs, it really needs to be break down to the provincial and to subnational level so that people could really implementing their targets, that we can achieve that NDC commitment. And we don't really see a well-structured adaptation implementation framework as strong as mitigation framework. So I think in terms of putting more adaptation target into the NDC, that we definitely need to work more on that. And also we need to further enhance the implementation framework to implement adaptation in terms of subnational actors. I think in that part, WF has been working together with a lot of our network offices to promote adaptation. And also we can work together with other related stakeholders. For example, forestry management administration, and also like land management, the water management administration, that we can promote the cross-practice, cross-area collaboration to achieve adaptation targets, which is also quite unique for adaptation work than mitigation work. Thank you.
Thank you, Della. Do you see that happening now in China? I mean, you mentioned about how, you know, for mitigation, at least there are targets that are assigned to different administrative officers and they are actually held accountable for it. So do you see that also happening in adaptation? But also, if you could explain a little bit on how those targets are actually divided across the administrative bodies in China, that would be useful. Thanks.
Okay. I think currently, after the top leadership team have already announced the new targets, all the departments related have been trying to break down the targets into their daily work. So there's a very good momentum right now all over China, from the central government to the local government, to achieve the new target, and they are looking for specific approach to achieve that. In terms of adaptation, I think there's quite some measurements in the progress preparation. And also the international collaboration has been including more and more adaptation related work into the framework. For example, between China and EU, particularly the Netherlands, there's the new adaptation secretariat already established, and looking for more framework and specific target list to be implemented together. And also we can see that in terms of forestry, I think there are more potential area to work together with. Also because of the coastal line issue has been raised up to the coastal provinces and cities. I think this part of work has been quite, has caught a lot of attention. So together with the forestry management team, I think the cities and the provincial government are working together to address the adaptation work in their city, and trying to, for example, rebuild up this ecosystem on coastal line, and also trying to find out more precautionary preparation work to be settled down in terms of transportation and energy sector, and also infrastructure building up. Planning work includes adaptation element.
Thank you for sharing all that. Okay, I just want to touch on something. You know, there's always been this debate about offsets, carbon offsets, and particularly in the forest sector. You know, many believe, and it rightly so, that, you know, the first port of call, or in terms of hierarchy of mitigation efforts, it should be reduction first, reduction at the point of emissions, and then you complement that with these forestry emissions. That's the hierarchy which, you know, for nature-based solutions is being promoted. So maybe let me seek your views on this. What do you think, Mina? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, very much so, actually, because I think we need to understand that in the, this whole thing about carbon trading and carbon offsets, it actually was a Kyoto process which started with the clean development mechanism. If we all recall, that was where the carbon trading, emissions trading became a big issue. And at that time, we must remember, under the Kyoto the Kyoto Protocol, developing countries didn't really have any targets. It was actually the developed who were supposed to achieve the targets. And this clean development mechanism was a way for developing countries to assist the developed world, the Annex 1 parties, to achieve their targets. So the financial transfers would happen in developing countries for them to do their emission reductions, the credits of which would then go to the developed world in terms of the credits that they would gain, and then that would be counted to their emission reductions. In the Paris Agreement framework under the NDCs, all parties have a responsibility to achieve their ambition. So if we sell our credits, what really, first of all, I'm not even going into the what does carbon credits mean and whether you can actually quantify, there's a whole quantifiability, there is a fungibility issue, there's all kinds of issues around that. But just on the concept itself, if a country actually like Malaysia, if we sell a lot of our credits, how then are we going to achieve our own domestic ambition? Because whatever credits you sell goes to the counting of the emission reductions of those who finance that, of the developed countries who finance that. So it's different from the Kyoto situation. So this is where we have expressed a lot of concern, particularly in the civil society sector. And this, just to link to a point about net zero, some of us are having huge concerns about this notion of net zero, because and the use of nature-based solutions in achieving that. If you look at the net zero at a national level, I think that's fine, because you have emissions and then you have the sinks and then the country balances. That's how we look at LULUCF and non-LULUCF and all that. We know that. But when you begin to look at it at an international level, just to give you an example, Switzerland, it is announced and revised NDC. And it said that a lot of it is a significant part is actually going to go towards offsets, and that's how it's going to go towards carbon neutrality. So it's not going real zero. It's not doing what you are saying, Lavanya, that you really actually go to real zero. But what you're actually doing is, again, relying on developing countries to achieve the emission targets of the developed world. And that's where I have pointed out right from the very beginning, we're very limited carbon space. So you can't be offsetting. And what you should be actually doing is, and this is what all the analysis, so the developed world has to go negative emissions. We're not championing geoengineering or all that. That's another controversy. But what we're saying is you actually should go negative, and developing countries should be able to actually, be assisted in doing much more. So I do think that we need to be very careful about how we understand this, because if you have to look at it from a fair shares approach. Otherwise, we are tripping ourselves, because there's this whole bandwagon that just because somebody announces carbon neutrality and net zero, that therefore they are doing, they're ambitious. They're not ambitious. They're running away because actually it delays action. It's not going to real zero. So many of us in the civil society movement, we are coming up with analysis on this, so that actually our governments and the wide world understand it. So we have to look at the devil in the details. And so whenever we talk about carbon trading, we need to be aware about what exactly does it mean. Is it really helping a developing country? We are more about, the final point I'll make, we are more about getting the finances for developing countries to ensure that they protect their forests, that they do all the nature-based solutions that they need at the national level, and in addition to what they have to do on their own anyway. So that's my response. So we have to be very careful about this, just saying these things without actually looking at the details.
Thank you, Meena. Dave, would you like to weigh in on this?
Sure. I'll say a couple of thoughts. Thanks, Meena. I think you're absolutely right. The accounts need to balance, right, across the globe. So if it doesn't balance, it's sort of we're kidding ourselves. So I think it's essential. I think these things also take a long time, and certainly the markets today, there is so much diversity in the quality of these carbon credits. There's a risk of greenwashing. There is leakage in the system. So there are a lot of problems in the market. Now that said, I do believe in the long term in the principle of externalities being priced. If not, you will not get the movement, right? So that's not just carbon, but it's also water quality, air quality, all these things need to be priced, and I think that will, in the long term, move us in the right trajectory. So that is somewhat philosophical, but I think it needs to translate into actual reality. Now, to also complement that a bit further on how I believe some of this can be, let's say, additive to the economy, is that in many parts of Southeast Asia, and perhaps Malaysia is a bit more developed, there are disincentives for you to preserve the forest, right, and to maintain that, and frankly to reforest. Now, if part of the solution to provide that economic incentive and serve the livelihoods of people are to give them opportunities to have these projects where they may reforest and they make a job out of it, that actually is quite a positive thing, right? I mean, the question is, how do you ensure that it's additive and it doesn't lead to leakage and, the accounts balance in the end. So my thought on it is twofold. One is, eventually you'll need it. You need some pricing or externality, and it has to work for the curve to bend globally. Two is that the accounts need to balance, as you said, Mina, very important. And three, I think there's some practical shorter term things where the livelihoods of people can be complemented by enhancing biodiversity and preserving forests or reforesting parts of the land that serves dual objectives. And I think where you can find those opportunities, we should double down on them.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. I think this has been a really very interesting discussion, and we've heard a lot of interesting viewpoints. So it will definitely help, I think, those who are in designing our NDCs to take these perspectives in consideration in doing so. And I believe also from the forestry side, actually, in the RED Plus finance framework, they have incorporated some of these ideas. I think we'll be hearing more about that in the near future, so watch out for that. Yeah. Mina, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to respond to Dave. I agree we have to price carbon, but we can price it through carbon taxes. I think what this whole notion about anti-tax is actually a very it's very neoliberal. Oh, you can't. The Europeans were doing, before emissions trading came on the scene with the US pushing it, they were doing carbon taxes. And they were doing it successfully. Even the World Bank is now advocating carbon taxes. So we definitely need to price carbon. No free riders. I'm in complete agreement. I just think that you have to still convince me about the benefits of carbon trading.
Okay.
Fair enough, Mina. Fair enough. I would just add one additional thought on it. I agree. I think we need to explore multiple mechanisms to see what works, right? What I've been encouraged by in this concept of these offsets is these large corporates that have made commitments to decarbonize their scope 1, 2, and 3, and so especially the more progressive ones. They demand quality of these offsets, and because they demand quality, they're doing some of these themselves, and they're getting on the ground and getting them both financed and delivered. And I think that drives real offsets, right? It's not the let's say on paper offset. So whether that in itself is sufficient for scale, probably not, but maybe part of the solution.
Thank you. Really a very fascinating debate. Let me now turn to this question that we've got from the floor. Can we achieve net zero carbon emission without incurring high costs, especially economic and transformation costs? Perhaps maybe to add to that, I could pose this to both Ella and Dio. Ella, what do you think are the opportunities available now for China with this robust target, and how does this align with the COVID-19 economic recovery?
Yes, I actually believe that it will be cheaper if we start earlier to work towards a net zero carbon emission target, particularly for China. I think China has gone through, in the past decade, the experience that if you have to pollute first, and then you will pay a very high price to solve the pollution problem. For example, the air pollution in China, it has been, back to 2008, it has been rising up to the general public and also to the international society's focus on China's air pollution. And also that is partially because of the high-speed development on the heavy industry, for example, on fossil fuel power generation and also on the heavy industry development like iron. So China has learned the lesson and now is trying to promote an industry upgrade to low carbon development and also green transformation within China. And also, I think China is looking for some more solutions or recommendations to the overseas investment. Because China is initiating a Belt and Road initiative and trying to do more investment in other developing countries. So there's a very good experience in China already on how to promote, for example, renewables industry. And then renewable industry has provided more, for example, jobs to the general public than the fossil fuel industries. And this is also very important, particularly after the pandemic, when you are looking for economical bounce back from the bottom, that you really want more jobs. And green transformation and also upgraded industry with more jobs will be the best choice. So if we are picking up the right solution as early as possible, it will cost us less in the future for the transformation. So we would also encourage the Chinese government and also the investors who are doing investment overseas to try to pick up the right industry that you want to invest in those countries to provide green jobs and also trying to minimize the transformation risk that if you invest in fossil fuel, for example, in other brown project that you are going to face in the future, given the international awareness on Paris Agreement and the climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ella. Thank you. Would you like to say something about this? Can we achieve net zero carbon emission without incurring high costs, especially economic and transformation costs?
Well, there are upfront costs for sure, whether it's high or low, that's relative to the country that we're talking about. But since NDC Partnership supports only developing countries, the cost will always be relatively high. And what we're seeing from at least the ones that we're supporting right now who are on the process of developing their NDC implementation plans, a lot of this are being transferred as conditional measures. Basically, this cost had to do with technology transfers or significant investments on infrastructure that these countries don't yet have on their own, or even have the capacities to operate this forms of technology. So there is upfront high cost depending on really what country we're talking about. But again, just to echo what Ella was saying, I mean, participating early on would of course would have significant advantages than participating later on, especially when you become seen as a latecomer. But there are also risks and opportunities that you can also take a look at it from that point of view, where if this particular technology is still prohibitive for your country to adapt, and that the how would I say, the return on investment is still not widely accepted as being at an acceptable level that your government will be able to shoulder it, and how would you process that as a country? So that in itself is still a big question. But yeah, there are incentives to participating early, of course.
Thank you very much. So I think with that, we have to unfortunately wrap up this really interesting session. There was a question for Dr. Nagu, but he's not around. The question was, will NGOs be involved as stakeholders in the stakeholder meetings this coming month? We will pass that on to Dr. Nagu, and we should be able to respond to the participant on this. I believe that should be the case, though. In conclusion, then, thank you to all the speakers for your excellent presentations, and also for fielding all these questions too, and providing so much more insights. And thank you very much. Really, we really appreciate your sharings here today. Thank you also to all the participants today and to IGEM 2020 organizers, MGTC and CASA, for including this event as part of the MCCG Climate Action Platform. And finally, allow me to also recognize the efforts of Kelvin Leong and Zara Pang from WWF Malaysia for all their hard work in organizing the series of events, and our comms team led by Rosanna Basri. Please join us for parts 2 and 3 of this series on NDCs tomorrow and Friday, same time, 4 to 6. And as you know, the organizers will be keeping all these events online till the end of the year. So please do encourage your friends and colleagues to come and watch these events later. We have 13 events in total as part of the Climate Action Forum organized by the Malaysian Climate Change Group. And finally, please do drop by at WWF Malaysia's exhibition booth at IGEM to learn more about our conservation work here in Malaysia. Thank you and have a very good evening, everybody.